Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our shirim on the inner world of happiness. And we're going to continue digging deeper into this quality, this world of joy that is always available to us. We ended last week's shir with the formula that to be joyous is to transform something into nothingness, to transform yesh into ayin. Yesh, as we said, this worldliness, physicality, existence itself, is a fragmented thing. It's a place of disintegration where things fall apart, separation, difference in quantity and quality. And ultimately, this world is marked by the fact that it's a world of changes. It's a chamber of changes. Things are one way in one moment and the next way in a different moment. When a person is encountering this worldliness in and of itself, while there might be certain categories that unify different things to show some semblance of order, we categorize things into neat categories so that we can make order out of existence. But in the end of the day, when a person contemplates this worldliness for what it is, we encounter an ever-changing and an ever-shifting landscape where each and every moment is a different iteration of something. Each and every moment brings with it new information that threatens the previous moment of stability or offers a new opportunity to shift my orientation. But it's a place of changes. Rabbi Nachman described this worldliness as Hechalei HaTemuros, based on earlier Kabbalistic literature, a chamber of changes, of shifts and replacements, where one thing takes the place of the other. The orientation towards this worldliness is ultimately marked by particularity, particularization, the prat, the part that is cut off from the whole. Each thing is its own individualized thing. Each person is their own thing. Each home is its own thing. Each encounter is its own thing. And in these myriad details of shifts and changes, it begins to appear that we live in a domain of multiplicity, referred to as Rishus Harabim, where there's so much difference and there's so much expansion and separation that it's impossible to uncover some baseline unifying theory that holds it all together. And when a person who is a changing creature encounters a world that is perpetually changing and circumstances that are always changing, so I can't develop a general unified outlook because I'm forced to engage with each and everything. This moment demands this mindset, this encounter demands this type of modality, this person needs this part of myself. And we feel that not only is the world scattered, but our selfhood is scattered because we feel the need to respond to each and every moment on the fly. And we become convinced and we get lulled into this confusing space where the world is a domain of multiplicity and changes and shifts, and there's no unity. And when a person lives from that perspective, obviously there's going to be sadness. Obviously there's going to be despondency because it's so overwhelming. Because when I'm trying to do one thing, suddenly I'm affected by another thing. And sadness is formed together with familiar thoughts of hopelessness, inability, overwhelmingness, a sense that I can't do this or that reality is too overwhelming. And in the face of that gnawing sense that there's going to be a breakdown because I can't maintain myself in this chamber of changes, the mind, unconsciously or consciously, enters into a depressive position, which is one that accepts the hopelessness of the circumstances, which is no longer trying to generate the energy of self needed to confront the world, but rather assuming an inability, assuming a disability. And from that place, the depressive tendency comes and it washes over the self and it doesn't want to do anything. Sadness is the loss of vitality, where a person feels overwhelmed by the mere intensity of what it means to face the day because there's so much, because there's so many pratim, there's so many particular points that need my attention, and the person can't do it. So when a person lives mitzad hayesh, When a person is looking at the world from the perspective of somethingness, of this worldly nature and all of its division and separation and fragmentation, we're not talking about anything bad. We're just talking about the mere way in which reality appears in front of a person. There's many, 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 many different ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in pratim, in particularized forms. And in the face of that inundation of particularities, devoid of a singular clause, so the mind is overwhelmed and it gives in to that natural tendency of hopelessness and that death drive that no longer wants to engage, no longer wants to try and actively face reality. And we disappear back into that listlessness and that heaviness and that burdensome gravitational pull of sadness, God forbid. That's the reality of somethingness. That's the reality of living in this world only mitzad hayesh, where I wake up in the morning as a separate creature and I encounter each and every moment of the day as separate elements. But the secret is that this yesh that we encounter, all of existence that we encounter down here, is not the end-all be-all of the story. No matter the evidence that seems to say that the external nature of reality is the final word, where we encounter the hardness or the softness or the coldness or the warmth, all of the different elements that define objective reality. It can be felt, it can be touched, it could be sensed, it can be measured, it could be commodified. All of these elements lend to this bilbul, this confusion that tells us that this worldliness in its external form is the most essentially true thing about reality. But the secret of transforming somethingness into nothingness, of being mahapech yesh la'ayin, is slowly but surely cultivating the deep awareness and faith that behind all of the riboy, at the heart of all of the disintegration and fragmentation and multiplicity and overwhelmingness and the cacophony of all of the different voices that are emerging from this worldliness, that at the core of it, at the core of the domain of multiplicity, there's a secret inner point of unity which holds everything together. And it reveals that in truth, beneath every particularized expression of somethingness, there is an undulating unified light of nothingness, of ayin, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, of the fact that everything in existence, from the most particularized particular form of experience to more expansive particular forms of experience, all of it, b'li yotze min haklal, there's absolutely no particular form of existence in this world that is not included within this principle. Everything that we see, everything that we touch, everything that we encounter is fundamentally rooted in an original form of nothingness, of divine nothingness, of ayin, which reveals how it's all unified, how all of the differentiation is emergent from a singular point of light. When a person is able to tap in to the shoresh of ayin, to that source of nothingness, of divine nothingness, that rests at the core of all shifts and changes, that's going to be the place where we're able to download or develop the predisposition towards seeing the world through a lens of joy. Sadness comes about when we're stuck in the pratim, when we're stuck in the particulars, when we're caught up with all of the differentiation and the overwhelmingness of all of the multiple things that need to be done. Joy comes about when a person is able to tap into the warmth and the comfort and the comforting knowledge that all of these changes, all of this noise, all of the feelings and all of the differentiation and all of the miles and miles and miles of experience that each mind encounters each and every day, all of it is rooted in a singular point of unity, which is divine revelation, which is the fact that Hashem wants the world to appear this way. When we can uncover the fact that beneath all of the particularization and the changes of this world, there rests a singular unity of divine light that wants the world to appear this way, that wants the world to be operating in differentiation and particularization, but that the particularization is not the end-all be-all. In truth, the thing driving the entire nature of reality is the divine nothingness that rests at the heart of all things. That's the place where simcha is going to be revealed in a person's life. Because when I'm overwhelmed and I'm stuck in the pratim and I'm stuck in the changes and the shifts and the different colors, So the overwhelmingness lends itself to a depressive position, which is a relinquishment on the attempt to change, and an acceptance of hopelessness, which is where sadness comes from. And despondency comes from that place of feeling that I can't change, I can't handle it. But when I come to realize that all of the changes and all of the noise and all of the things that feel overwhelming are in truth beautiful because Hashem is revealing them. And that at the core of all of them is a grand unified theory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unified light of infinitude that is meaningful beyond all of the meaning of all of those particulars. It's the thread of unity. It shows how everything, all of the differences, all of the parts, all of the senses, all of the feelings, all of the responses are all rooted in a singular core of pure affirmation of goodness. The light of Or Ein Sof, the light of Ayin. Now this Ayin, this nothingness that rests at the core of existence, which would theoretically enable us to transform the somethingness of this worldliness into the true form of itself, which is the divine nothingness. It's not a simple thing to do, obviously. It's something that a person has to cultivate, and it's something that a person has to lean into and put on the garments of make-believe, where we operate with this mindset in spite of the fact that it lacks evidence. Because what we said about yesh, what we said about somethingness and this worldliness and our experiences and all of the despondency-inducing changes that a person might encounter, which lends itself towards that sad position, that's measurable, that's felt, that's experiential. That's what appears to be most real vis-a-vis human processing. When it comes to ayin, when it comes to nothingness, when it comes to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite light of the Or Ein Sof, that's not something that's subject to measurement. It's not something that we can measure. It's not a commodity. It's not something that's evidence-based. We can't look at it and point to it and say, this is what I really need in my life. This is real. It's the opposite. It's ethereal. It seems to be not real. It's devoid of identifying markers. It's nothingness itself. And so the work of transforming somethingness into nothingness, or the somethingness of this reality back to its source in nothingness of divine revelation, it's a counterintuitive shift in the mind. The intuition of the mind wants to attach itself to that which is measured, physical, real, present, and that's where the sadness emerges, because that's a place of shifts and changes and disorientation and fragmentation. To attach oneself to an invisible nothingness that rests at the core of all things, yet cannot be identified, measured, or touched, because to touch it, identify it, or measure it would to transform it into somethingness. Nothingness, by definition, can't be grasped. It's a very difficult task. It forces the mind to utilize different tools of acknowledgement, different tools of recognition. This worldliness and all of the differentiation and its sensual and objective form, that's grasped by way of the intellect and the senses, something that's evidence-based. When it comes to divine nothingness, where it's not an object and it's not something that's identifiable, the only tool that we're able to actually utilize in order to encounter that light is faith, is emunah. Something that transcends logic, something that transcends the necessity of evidence-based affirmation, or even a felt sense of something. If a person is trying to experience nothingness in the way that they know somethingness, that I want to know God's nothingness as much as I know the somethingness of creation, then a person is in an idolatrous quest of trying to force the infinite light to conform to our human assumptions and tendencies. And either we'll commodify God or we'll find ourselves stuck in sadness. The secret of transforming somethingness into nothingness is the secret of transcending away from the intellectual basis of evidence-based reality and entering into something that is far more primary, something that is far more reflective of the core of the neshama, which is emunah. Emunah, a willingness to no longer need direct evidence to know something, but rather a predisposition, a pre-downloaded mindset that is there not based on evidence, but rather it's there because I've chosen to think it. That's emunah, that we choose the path of emunah. And we choose the path of living from the tzad, from the perspective of divine nothingness. We don't choose to identify with the particulars of our lives. That's evidence-based. That's revealed in front of us. A person doesn't have to choose that. That's what reality seems to be. That's the seemingly external nature of reality. But to engage mitzad emuna, to enter into a place in the mind, to ascend upwards into that cavern of the mind where emuna fills it, that's a choice. That's not evidence-based. It's a perpetually active choice. When a person is living in this world in yesh, it's sadness-inducing. But what the Rebbe Rashab writes in Taf Reish Nun Tes is that there's this unique thing about somethingness, about this world that appears to be so separate and fragmented, that the ability to transform somethingness into nothingness, to transform yesh into ayin, and to live mitzad ma, to live from a perspective of divine self-nullification, because all that exists is the divine flow that it's expressing itself at each and every moment for each and every individual in all of the totality of their experience. To tap back into ayin is to realize that this yesh that I'm experiencing is actually a yesh me'ayin. That existence, as it expresses itself down in this world, says the Rebbe Rashab, appears to be a very sturdy and stabilized thing. And in the sense that it's sturdy and stabilized, and it appears as something fundamentally real, it expresses itself by way of fundamental distance from God. That there's no connection between the source of nothingness and the outgrowth of somethingness. Yesh me'ayin, somethingness coming from nothingness, says the Rebbe Rashab, is a profoundly distant thing. There's a richuk. If the relationship was cause and effect or source and outgrowth, so then we can see and we can identify the chain of events that allows this outgrowth to emerge from the source. And so it's not a sense of utter distance, because I could understand how this thing was made by that thing and how that thing was made by that thing. That's where there's a precedent as to how things come into existence. But yesh me'ayin, creation ex nihilo, the secret, the radical secret of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude, there's no direct chain of events that links the somethingness of the final product of the particulars of this world back up to the divine source of nothingness, because somethingness and nothingness are apparently absolute opposites to one another. Nothingness is infinite, somethingness is finite, and those two elements seemingly cannot coexist together. And so from one perspective, this worldliness, when we say that it's yesh me'ayin, that it's something from nothing, what we're declaring is that the source of nothingness, the true divine source, is very, very far from the actualization of somethingness, that in yesh, a person finds themselves distracted and confused. But at the very same moment, says the Rebbe Rashab, as much as yesh and physical existence in its particular forms and changes reflects a deep distance and removal away from the infinite light of nothingness, at the very same moment, we have to also become aware of the fact that because there's no precedent to the emergence of somethingness, because it's not a byproduct of a stage that preceded it, so we have to come upon the knowledge that the source of nothingness that gives life to the reality of somethingness is ever present at each and every moment within the apparent somethingness itself. That if something was created by a machine, that was created by a machine, that was created by a machine, so ultimately the creation of the previous machines is not dependent on the existence of the machine that created it. Just like an artisan who creates a chair, the chair can exist after the artisan is done. But something that is emergent from within nothingness itself has absolutely no sustainability, nothing to stand upon, no foundational basis for its existence other than the divine source of nothingness that's perpetually animating that thing to enable it to come into existence in the appearance of separation. And so the Rebbe Rashab says there's a profound paradox here. On the one hand, somethingness is the place that's fundamentally distant from nothingness because of how far it is and how particularized and sad it feels. But at the same point, we also have to become aware that every moment's appearance and every minimal to the highest minimum degree imaginable, every minimal appearance of somethingness is rooted fundamentally in the divine nothingness that is giving light to it at that moment. And so existence is a profoundly mixed bag to the degree that it's paradoxical at its core. On the one hand, there's nothing more distant from godliness. On the other hand, godliness is perpetually enlivening existence at each and every moment, and that the somethingness and the particularization and the changes that we encounter are not the end-all be-all, but rather there's a divine nothingness that is flowing through it, that ayin. Now, this divine nothingness, Rabbi Nachman explains, is not nothingness in the way that we relate to nothingness. It doesn't mean the absence of something. Typically, we say that a cup is something and the lack of a cup is nothing. There's no cup here. But when it comes to divine nothingness, when it comes to the ayin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're not talking about the absence of something. Rather, we're talking about a revelation that is so full and so unified and so illuminated that the only way in which it can reveal itself is in the notion of nothingness. There's no separation. There's no terms or definitions that can be used to bag it and tag it. It can't be pigeonholed by particular terms. We gesture towards it. We orient ourselves towards it. We have names that reflect itself towards it and contain its essence, but it's never identifiable. The source of divine nothingness is a true something. It's the truest something in the world. It's the divine vitality that rests at the core of each and everything, of all of the particularity. And that's the mindset that needs to be cultivated in order to enter into joy. Rabbi Nachman says that if a person is living in this world, they encounter all of the different changes throughout the day. But if you come to realize that this worldliness is in truth just an external garment of the divine nothingness of ayin, of Hashem's light that we have emunah in, of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was infinite before the creation of the world, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided, berachmanuso hagadola, so to speak, to create the world, and that even after the creation of the world, the divine nothingness and the unfathomable unity of divine light is so present that reality makes absolutely no difference to it. Of ein oin milvado, of bittul behechlet, of the chachma, of the realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing his infinite essence down here, so to say, by way of limitation. When a person taps into that emunah, the ayin, the nothingness that rests at the core of existence, is not just the negation of existence. It's not just me world denying and saying, no, reality doesn't exist. The particulars and changes don't exist, because they do exist. The Torah and mitzvah is particularization. So we can't say it doesn't exist. It exists because of the divine desire to allow it to exist. And the only thing that's enabling it to exist is this profound illumination of divinity and illumination and well-being and all-rightness and joy and simcha and calmness and comfort and hashgacha pratis and a radical belief in goodness that rests at the core of it, that place of ayin. Ayin is a very real thing. It's just invisible. And when we tap into that ayin, when we affirm for ourselves that all of these changes that I'm experiencing today, all of it, it's all expressive of a fundamental unity. Now, how do we do this, though? What are the tools in which we can transform somethingness into nothingness? And so this is really ultimately what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh came into the world to reveal. That the Baal Shem Tov came to teach a very simple teaching. The Baal Shem Tov came to speak of a preconditioned affirmation of existence, a deep yes saying to the world, a deep acknowledgement of unity and the singular nature of all things, even prior to evidence, even prior to experiencing the world. The world is parts, the world is separation, the world is fragmentation. Divine nothingness is unity and all-inclusive light. If a person starts with the particularization of the day and they enter into their day and they try and find a grand unified theory, we've lost already. We can't start within the territory of differentiation, says the Baal Shem Tov. If you start in the territory of differentiation, then you will be stuck in differentiation, and what we will find is sadness. Yes, there might be moments of victory, which is an alleviation of sadness, but it's not the unconditional joy that is necessary of living a life of joy. That's a simcha that's dependent on external circumstances, and external circumstances are subject to change. And just as a change can bring about something desired, a change can bring about something undesired. So to wade into the differentiation of the day and the existence of this worldliness first, and to try and find joy from that place, is an impossible mission. The Baal Shem Tov came along to reveal to us that we must cultivate a profound positivity bias to live with an awareness of Ein Od Milvado first and foremost. That is my first orientation towards the day. That when I wake up, prior to getting out of bed, after saying Moda'ani, what's meant to be contemplated is that Ribbono Shel Olam, you are unified. The world is of non-existence in the light of your grand, unified, infinite expressions. All of the differentiation, all of the shifts and the changes and the particular forms of experience are null and void when seen through the lens of your eternal and infinite source of light. Help me, Hashem, remember your unity within differentiation. Help me affirm the goodness of existence in spite of the appearance otherwise. When a person downloads that mindset, this pre-orientation of goodness and joy and well-being and unity, then when I enter into the world of changes and separation and yesh, I'll have a much deeper foundation of all rightness and unity that is prepared for differentiation. I'm prepared to see all of the different tabs that are open in my life because I know and I've affirmed for myself that they're all ultimately coming from the unified light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and what he wants to give me today. Each day, says Rabbi Nachman, can be seen as changes that are meaningless in all of their variated physicalized forms, or when seen from the inner quality of divine light that's expressing itself through the particular nature of each day, a person can come to see divine wisdom unfolding in front of them and remuzim and hints to them as to how to come closer to God. The only difference is dependent upon how did I prepare myself to face the day? Did I enter into the chaos of the day without the preparatory stage of tapping into the ayin of divine nothingness and illumination and an affirmation of divine emunah? In which case I'm going to be lost and I'm going to be stuck? Or did I take 2 minutes in my day to download this pre-orientation, this machshava that I'm choosing stubbornly to live in accordance with, which is that everything is good and everything is light and everything is unified. And everything is a direct revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. And I don't know how and I don't know what, but nevertheless, it's all contained within that original desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bestow the greatest ultimate possibility of goodness to each and every one of us, to every aspect of existence. And in spite of the appearances, there's an ultimate joy that's going to be available for each and every person when Hashem decides that it's there for us. This radical affirmation of goodness, this radical confirmation bias of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything that I see is ultimately rooted in the nothingness that I don't see. And that yesh, in spite of the fact that it appears so separate from ayin, is in truth a direct expression at every moment of an ayin that precedes it. If I download that message into my mind each morning and I pause and I focus on it every hour throughout the day or every 2 hours throughout the day, and then I close my day by returning back to that mindset of the klal that contains all of the pratim, then I'm going to live a happier life, then I'm going to be able to transform somethingness back into nothingness because I operate with a preconceived notion of divine nothingness. This is the secret that the Arizal describes as Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Ha'olam, the radical affirmation that begins the process of the day. A radical yes saying Hashem, you are good, the world is good, I am good, people are good, everything is good, and help me experience simcha, that sense of shleimus with you, Hashem. And then I enter into the world of changes, where I'm now able to bring that goodness that I believe in into the particularized forms I'm experiencing. If I don't download the goodness, if I don't tap into that emunah at the beginning, what the Baal Shem Tov said is that we first now have to operate from what is right. We have to start with saying yes, and then we can address the no. We have to radically orient ourselves to Einon Milvado, and then I can enter into this worldliness and its changes and its colors. Without that, a person is lost. Without that, a person has fallen into despondency already, even if they haven't felt it yet. It's only this secret, this preconceived notion of divine nothingness that I radically affirm each and every day through my choice of faith, that I'm going to see throughout the day, this positivity bias, this confirmation bias of seeing Hashgacha Pratas everywhere and believing deeply in the grand totality of a unified process in which Hashem reveals himself, and how all of history and all of the fragmentation is ultimately just one unfolding story of divine expression of a goodness that is so beyond the capacity to imagine that it appears sometimes by way of its opposite. Only by way of choosing to live with that narrative structure am I going to be able to enter into the murky territories of changes and this worldliness and encounter joy. This is why Rabbi Nachman can speak of the radical secret of the king who says to his son, I want you to be king. I want to give kingship over to you. But I have to warn you that the only way that you are worthy of maintaining kingship is if you ensure that you remain joyous at all times, even if circumstances take your kingship away from you. Unconditional joy, unconditional positive regard. That's what the king wanted from his son. Only if you can tap into the unconditionality of joy, the never changing nature of the source of joy, only then are you worthy of living properly in this world. Because if you think that joy is dependent on particular orientations of this moment or what's taking place in the world, whether I'm king or whether I'm not king, so then when you're king, you'll be joyous. And when you're not king, you won't be joyous. And if there's a moment of the possibility of not being joyous, then you're already on a certain level not joyous. But if you accept the preconceived reality of the fact that no, everything is joy, everything is light, everything is good, there's a light of unity that emerges from within every aspect of existence, waiting to be revealed. And there's nothing that doesn't bespeak and scream out the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's profound and unfathomable unity. If I confirm that, if I cultivate that bias in thinking, if I develop the habitual status of imagining this truth over and over and over and over again until it becomes the operating system of my mind, then my joy is independent of all shifts and all circumstances. Whether I'm king or not king makes absolutely no difference to me. I'll be able to maintain my simcha. That's the secret of the Baal Shem Tov's recipe for joy, choosing joy before any evidence that supports or denies it. Joy is a mindset, it's a machshava, it's a living with a bittul to that source of ayin. May ayin yavo Ezri, my help comes from you, Hashem, the infinite nothingness that rests at the core of every aspect of somethingness. That invisibility, that unspeakable source and vitality that we don't know, but we deeply intuit at every moment of our lives. To affirm that, to live from that side. Then we can tap into a secret of unconditional joy. This, the Maharal says in a remarkable way in many, many places, but I'm seeing this from Perek Daled in Pirkei Avos, Mishnah Yud Ches, and Derech Chaim, where the Maharal wants to understand the very important statement of Chazal. The language of Vayehi, and it was, orients a person towards pain and sadness. Or, and it will be, orients a person to sadness. Vahaya, and it was, awakens a person to joy. And so the Maharal says as follows. Look at what happens when you take the vav away from those words. The notion of yehi, which is what brings a person towards sadness and joy, sadness and despondency and pain, is that this thing is unfinished. I don't know how this is going to end up. I'm still in the process of the particularities. It's not at a state of rest. It's at a state of development, and it's ever presenting itself in new and new ways. If a person lives from the perspective of yehi, I don't know how it's going to be, but it's going to be. So that's the place of pain and sadness, because that's where you get stuck within the particular shifts and changes of this world. But the v'haya, when you take away the vav, you're left with haya, it was. That means this is a stabilized notion. This is a preconceived notion that I am living with, irrespective of whatever reality tells me. It's a bias of faith and positivity that I am cultivating and choosing to live with, and it's firm and it's established. That's going to be the secret of happiness. Why? Because when I'm aware of the fact that there's nothing that influences my decision to be happy other than my decision to be happy, and to tap into that koyach man, to tap into that bittul of the ayin that rests at the core of the yesh, independent of any evidence, because it's so deeply unified and invisible it can't be proven, then there's nothing that's going to take me away from my joy. And there's no source of sadness because I'm operating in a place where I decided already on my happiness. I'm happy because I'm happy. I've chosen to live mitzad ha'elyon, baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed are you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke and created the world, saying yes to existence before even encountering existence. Cultivating this mindset morning, afternoon, and night, and as needed whenever we find ourselves in stuckness. This brings us to a place of Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Ha'olam. The Arizal says that when you look at the Rosh Tevos, it's Bishav, equanimity. Beis, Shin, Vav, Hey, Baruch Sha'amar V'haya Ha'olam. This radical orientation that whatever appears in front of me has to be seen through this preconsideration of a downloaded perspective of a joyfulness and an ease and a well-being that's rooted in a radical affirmation of a faith in an invisible, infinitely light and positive expression of godliness. That's the shivisi, that's the equanimity, that's the shav. All things are equal. And this is the recipe for joy. First halach in Shulchan Aruch, the Baal Shem Tov tells us, is shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. I place God in front of me always. I place joy in front of me always. I place the radical affirmation of divine nothingness, the ayin that is available but not identifiable. I know of its existence in spite of the fact that I can't grasp its essence, but the inability to grasp its essence doesn't diminish its reality. When I affirm that, Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, so that I'm able to enter into joy. Says the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, that Shavisi is from a language of Hishta'avus, equanimity. All things equal. Whatever is going on in my life, in the world of changes, in the world of Yesh, I can accept it as a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light because I pre-record that message in my mind. In that place, Shavisi, the equanimity of knowing that everything is divine unity, everything is reflective of ayin, of a nothingness that I have to choose to have faith in rather than evidence that will prove it to me. But as long as I have faith in that nothingness and the source of unity that unifies all particularization and enables me to wade through this world of changes and shifts and colors and enter into a place of unity, that's going to be the ultimate place of joy. That's the secret of transforming somethingness into nothingness. Ezra Hashem will continue next week with the process of now, once we affirm the ayin and the source of ayin, and we cultivate the mindset of living mitzad ayin, of affirming our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ultimate revelation by way of Or Ein Sof, and how there's nothingness at the core of all somethingness, a nothingness that's not the negation of presence, but rather a radical affirmation of divine presence, a capital N nothingness, a nothingness that is so much of a something that it can't be identified as anything in particular other than nothing itself. Then we're going to see how the next stage of joy is to re-enter into the world of the particularities, of the pratim and the differentiation, but armed with the wisdom of ayin, armed with the sense of divine nothingness. Then we'll be able to address each and every part, each and every thing, all of the chaos in a very tame, sober, calm, leveled way, which cultivates joy. Be'ezras Hashem.